Elvis's nighttime rituals at Graceland were practically legendary. The security team tells the story. Hamburgers at 2 in the morning, French fries at 3, more pills at 4. He'd keep his room ice cold, sitting in the dark for hours on end. During the day, he never went outside, but at night it was like he lived in a completely different world. He'd watch movies, listen to music, sometimes call friends over, but most of the time he stayed alone. Graceland staff say there were nights when he didn't sleep at all. He could take 10 different medications in a single night. Nobody could tell him to stop. He was a king, but at the same time he'd become a prisoner of his own body, and everyone knew this lifestyle would come to an end someday. Unfortunately, that end was closer than anyone thought. It was a tragedy unfolding in silence at Memphis's most famous mansion, far from the world's eyes. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the rest of this story and learn the truths about Elvis's life that nobody knew, because what I'm about to tell you is just the beginning of what happened behind Graceland's walls. Secret details, hidden memories, and unforgettable testimonies await you. On a July night in 1975, young security guard David Stanley would never forget what he witnessed on his first day at Graceland. At 3 in the morning, a bell rang from Elvis's room. Security Chief Dick Grob turned to him. "Get ready, it's mealtime." Stanley looked at him in disbelief. Who eats at 3 in the morning? Elvis wasn't sleeping through the night, eating at irregular hours, taking pills and trying to sleep again. This was a cycle that had been going on for years. The legend living in Memphis's famous mansion was now living an entirely different life. The scene he saw when he first entered Elvis's room was shocking. The room was freezing, the thermometer reading around 15 degrees Celsius. The curtains were tightly drawn. It was dark. Elvis sat in bed, wrapped in blankets. His eyes were open, but his gaze was empty. When Stanley brought the hamburgers, Elvis didn't even thank him. He just took them and ate. The television was on, but it was like he wasn't watching. He was just staring at the screen, lost in thought. What was truly shocking was that Elvis opened his pill box even while eating. On the nightstand there were 15 different medication bottles: sedatives, sleeping pills, painkillers, stimulants. Each bottle had different doctor names, different dates. Elvis took several pills and swallowed them with water. Grob pulled Stanley out of the room and said quietly, "You'll get used to this, but once you've seen it, you can't forget it." Stanley understood that night. The man living at Graceland wasn't the Elvis the world knew. He was a tired, exhausted, lost soul. And this was just one night. Stanley would live through hundreds more nights like this. Elvis's sleep pattern began to deteriorate in the mid-1960s. He was touring constantly. A different stage every night. A different hotel room. After concerts, his adrenaline was high. He couldn't sleep for hours. The screams of fans would echo in his ears. The stage lights had gone out, but they still flickered before his eyes. Over time, those fun nights gave way to sleepless, restless nights. Doctors got involved. At first it was mild sedatives. 1 pill, maybe 2. Just to relax, just to be able to sleep. But his body adapted quickly. Elvis said to his friends in 1968, "I can't sleep without the pills anymore, but I can't live without them either." This sentence was the summary of the vicious cycle he'd fallen into. When he returned to Graceland, his sleep pattern didn't improve, it got worse. He slept during the day, stayed awake at night. He didn't want to see the sun. He'd darken his windows, close his curtains. Light hurt him. Even if not physically, it was a psychological pain. Daytime was for normal people. For people going to work, kids going to school. Everyone participating in life. And Elvis didn't feel normal anymore. He was a king, but he felt like a ghost. Dr. George Nicopolis testified in court. Elvis's biggest problem was not being able to sleep. He'd call me every night, saying he couldn't sleep, but every new medication would eventually stop working. His body was adapting. The dose kept increasing, and eventually I couldn't control it anymore. He was adjusting his own doses. This statement showed how Elvis had completely lost control. The medications weren't serving him anymore. He was serving the medications. Elvis's habit of keeping his room ice cold had a logical reason. One side effect of the medications he took was creating an intense sensation of heat in the body. Elvis sweated frequently and felt uncomfortable. The pills felt like they were burning his body. Graceland staff member Nancy Rooks recalls, Elvis would always tell me colder, colder. We'd turn the air conditioning all the way up. Sometimes it would get down to 15 degrees. When I'd go in, I'd be shivering from the cold, but he'd be sitting there wrapped in a blanket, comfortable. It was like the cold gave him peace. Maybe it did. Maybe the cold distanced him from reality. It had a kind of numbing effect. The cold wasn't just a physical need, it was a psychological escape. Elvis wanted to get away from the world, from light, from sound, from people. The dark, cold room provided him with isolation. Nobody could reach him there. Nobody could expect anything from him. Rick Stanley recalls, when you entered Elvis's room, you felt like you'd entered another world. Outside it could be Memphis's humid, hot weather, but inside it was like winter, dark, silent, cold, and Elvis sat in the middle of it, wrapped in a blanket, motionless. The same expression was always on his face, exhaustion, deep, endless exhaustion, like living itself was wearing him out. Years later, Priscilla Presley said, Elvis completely lost himself in his final years. He didn't want to talk, didn't want to go outside, he didn't want to see people. He just wanted to stay in his room, alone with his pills. I tried to save him, but he wouldn't listen, because he already felt lost, and someone who's lost doesn't want to be saved. They just accept their lostness. Elvis's nighttime meals had become legendary. Everyone knew he could want food at any hour of the morning. There was no pattern. Sometimes at 2, sometimes at 3, sometimes at 4. When Elvis was hungry, he'd ring the bell and the kitchen would spring into action. His favorite foods were well known: hamburgers, French fries, fried chicken, pasta salad, plenty of ketchup. But sometimes he'd want different things too. Sometimes he'd ask for the famous Fool's Gold sandwich. This sandwich contained a jar of peanut butter, a jar of jelly, and half a pound of bacon, a massive food item crammed into a toasted loaf of bread, about 8,000 calories. Elvis could sometimes eat 2 of them in one night. Nobody could tell him to stop. These meals weren't just about satisfying hunger, they were a search for comfort, a form of therapy. Elvis felt good when he ate. Maybe for a moment, maybe for a few minutes, but he felt good. Food reminded him of his childhood, the poor days in Mississippi, the simple meals his mother made. His cook Mary Jenkins recalls, Elvis would be happy when eating. He'd smile, he'd say thank you. Sometimes he'd even chat with me, talk about the old days. But when the meal was over, his face would go sullen again. It was like happiness only lasted a few bites. Then that sad, tired expression would return. Elvis's weight problem also stemmed from these meals. In the 70s, he'd gained serious weight. When he went on stage now, he didn't have his old appearance. His face was swollen. His body had gotten heavy. Doctors told him to diet, but he wouldn't listen. Food wasn't just a need for him, it was therapy, but it was temporary therapy. When the meal was over, the emptiness would return, and to fill that emptiness, he needed either more food or more pills. Sonny West recalls, Elvis told me one night, I know I'm gaining weight. I know I'm living unhealthy, but I don't care, because I'm not happy. And why should an unhappy person take care of themselves? I couldn't answer him, because he was right. He wasn't happy. He was just looking for temporary relief. In food, in pills, in darkness. But none of it was permanent. There were always 15 to 20 medication bottles next to Elvis's bed, each for a different purpose. To sleep, to wake up, to calm down, to ease pain. Each bottle had different labels, different doses, different warnings. Elvis was adjusting the doses himself. He didn't need a doctor anymore. He'd take a pill, wait an hour. If he couldn't sleep, he'd take another one. Then another one. Then maybe a different type. His body wasn't responding to normal medication doses anymore. Every day he needed more. In 1976, Red West asked him, "How many pills do you take a day?" Elvis laughed and said, "I stopped counting. Maybe 10, maybe 20. It doesn't matter. What matters is feeling comfortable." Red told him, "But these pills are going to kill you someday." Elvis's response was cold. "Maybe, but at least I'll die comfortable." This sentence showed how hopeless Elvis was. He wasn't struggling to live anymore, just to exist. Dr. Nicopolis testified in court. "Elvis constantly asked me for new medications. When I said no, he'd go to other doctors. Eventually I realized that if I didn't give them, someone else would. I thought it would be safer if it was under my control. But I was wrong. Elvis had completely taken control. I wasn't his patient anymore, I was his drug supplier." This confession showed how helpless everyone around Elvis was. Security guard Sam Thompson recalls, "One night Elvis forgot to take his medication. He couldn't sleep until morning. He was having a nervous breakdown. He was clenching his fists, pacing around the room. Every half hour he'd ring the bell, shouting, 'Where are my pills?' Finally we brought the doctor. He gave him an injection. Only then did he calm down. That night I realized Elvis couldn't live without these pills anymore. He was dependent on them, completely dependent. And this dependency was slowly destroying him." Elvis's final years at Graceland were a period of increasing loneliness. The mansion that was once full of friends, fun, and lively, had now become a silent, desolate place. He once had what was called the Memphis Mafia, his close circle. Dozens of friends were there every night. Laughter, jokes, music. But in the 70s, many of his friends had left him. Some couldn't take it anymore. Some had been fired. Elvis wasn't like he used to be. He was angry, volatile, paranoid. One day he could be very affectionate. The next day he'd yell at the same person for no reason. The reason was clear: the pills. The pills had completely changed his personality. Linda Thompson, Elvis's girlfriend, said, "Elvis was very lonely in his final period. There were people around him, but nobody was really by his side. They were all his employees. They all depended on him. Nobody loved him. Nobody valued him. I loved him, but even I couldn't trust him. He was suspicious of everything. He even had me followed. It was like he felt everyone was going to betray him. And maybe he was right, because many people around him were trying to use him." Elvis would call friends to Graceland at night, but these invitations weren't fun like they used to be. He'd sit silently, watch television. He wouldn't talk, he wouldn't interact. He just wanted people around, because he was afraid of being alone. But at the same time, he was also afraid of really connecting with people. Charlie Hodge recalls, "Elvis called me one night. It was 4 in the morning. He was sitting in the dark, alone, crying. I asked him what happened. He said, 'Charlie, I'm so lonely. Nobody understands me. Nobody sees me. I'm just a name, a brand, a symbol. But I'm a person, and this person is very tired.' I hugged him. I didn't know what to say, because he was right. He really was very lonely." Elvis's loneliness drove him more toward pills. The pills made him forget his loneliness, temporarily. For a few hours maybe. But this temporary relief was getting shorter each time. The emptiness felt deeper. It was a vicious cycle. And this cycle would take him to the end. Nobody could save him, because he didn't want to be saved. He just wanted to forget and disappear. August of 1977 was Elvis's final month. Everyone at Graceland noticed his condition was getting serious. He struggled even walking now. He had difficulty breathing. His face was constantly swollen. His eyes lifeless. He could barely stand on stage. In one concert recording, Elvis forgot the words while singing. The orchestra stopped. Fans watched with concern. But he still didn't stop. Stopping meant dying. And Elvis wasn't ready yet. On the night of August 16th, Elvis was in his room at Graceland. His girlfriend, Ginger Alden, was with him. He couldn't sleep again. He'd taken his medications, but sleep wouldn't come. Around midnight, he said to Ginger, "I'm going to the bathroom. I'll read a little. Maybe I'll fall asleep that way." Ginger was already dozing off. Elvis went to the bathroom. He picked up a book. He sat down. And he never came back. Around 2 in the afternoon, Ginger woke up. Elvis was still in the bathroom. She knocked on the door. No answer. She opened the door. Elvis was lying on the floor, motionless. His eyes were open, but seeing nothing. Ginger screamed. The security team came running. An ambulance was called, but it was too late. Elvis Presley, at 42 years old, had lost his life in Graceland's bathroom. The autopsy report revealed striking details. 14 different drugs were detected in Elvis's blood. Sedatives, sleeping pills, painkillers, stimulants. They'd all mixed together. His heart couldn't handle the load. The official statement said heart attack. But everyone knew the real reason: the pills. Years of controlled dependency had finally gotten out of control and taken Elvis. The journey that began in that dark, cold room at Graceland had ended on the cold bathroom floor. Thousands of people gathered in front of Graceland at the funeral. They were crying, singing songs, praying. Elvis was a king to them. But very few knew that in his final years, the king had lived such an unhappy, lonely, exhausted life. Graceland's walls held many secrets, and these secrets slowly began to come out. The security team wrote books, doctors testified, friends gave interviews. The world learned. Elvis's nighttime rituals weren't just strange habits. They were actually a cry for help. But nobody had heard, or those who heard couldn't do anything. Elvis Presley's story isn't just the story of a music legend. It's the story of how fame, success, pressure, and loneliness can consume a person. The nighttime rituals at Graceland were the external reflection of Elvis's internal war. Every night the same cycle: insomnia, pills, food, loneliness, darkness. This cycle dragged him into a deeper and deeper abyss. And eventually that abyss completely swallowed him. Elvis's death wasn't sudden. It was the result of years of collapse. And this collapse had started in those dark, cold rooms at Graceland. Today Graceland is a museum. Hundreds of thousands of people visit every year. They see Elvis's room. But very few know the real story of that room. That room wasn't just a bedroom. That room was Elvis's final battlefield. He fought to stay alive every night there. But in the end, he lost. Because sometimes the biggest enemy isn't outside, it's inside. Elvis's enemy wasn't the pills. His enemy was his loneliness, his desperation, his hopelessness. And these enemies hid behind the pills. Elvis fought them. But he was unarmed, alone, and tired. Elvis's story teaches us something important. Success, fame, money, none of it guarantees happiness. Elvis was the most famous person in the world, but one of the most unhappy. He had millions, but no love. He had fans, but no friends. He had songs, but no peace. And in the end, everything he had wasn't enough to save him. What he really needed was something that couldn't be bought with any amount of money or fame: inner peace. And he couldn't find this peace anywhere. Not in pills, not in food, not in darkness. He just got lost in emptiness. Graceland's nights are silent now. Elvis's bell isn't ringing. Hamburgers aren't being prepared in the kitchen. The air conditioning isn't on full blast in the room. But the spirit of those nights is still there. Between the walls, in the dark corridors, in that cold room. Graceland isn't just a museum, it's also a monument. A place where a legend lived, fought, and lost. Elvis wasn't born there, but he died there. And his death tells more than his life. Because that death wasn't just the result of a heart attack. It was the result of years of collapse, exhaustion, loneliness. Sometimes even winners lose. Sometimes even kings fall. And sometimes even the brightest stars fade. Elvis faded in Graceland's dark nights. But his light still shines. In his music, in his story, in his memories, and in the lessons he left us. Living isn't just breathing. It's finding peace.